Let's talk about part 4 of your EBP. When you first open up the commentary for part 4, this should look very familiar to you when you are looking at the prompts. Once you have gone through part 3 and have completed your EBP pre-plan and have gone over that with your field-based coordinator, when you open up part 4, it will look almost identical to your part 3 EBP pre-plan. So once you are approved for all of the pieces of your pre-plan, you can dive into completing part 4. This should look extremely familiar to you. So you want to make sure that you are using the feedback that you received during your EBP pre-plan part 3 meeting. So let's look at the first prompt. Provide a general description of the intervention selected. So in your own words, tell us about the intervention. You want to make sure that you are being very thorough and very clear when you are describing or answering any of the prompts in any of the commentaries that you have to do across your field-based semester. Another piece that is extremely helpful is to be looking at the rubric and looking at the indicators in each section of the rubric that pertain to the specific part of the EBP that you are doing. That will show you very clearly what we are looking for in terms of expectations and how you are responding to these prompts. So the first prompt is providing a description of the intervention that you selected. So make sure that this is in your own words and that you're telling me very clearly and thoroughly about the intervention. The second prompt is, how does the intervention address an IEP goal? Your intervention should address an IEP goal unless that was something that was approved by one of your field-based coordinators that it does not address the IEP goal. If it doesn't address an IEP goal, then you're going to need to discuss what data supports you performing this intervention with the student. One very important piece of this prompt is to make sure that you are addressing the strengths and the needs of your learner and how those match up with the intervention that you are selecting. The next piece of part 4, the next prompt is identifying the resource used to design the intervention, and you're going to include the APA citation for your resource and a link if possible. So if you if you found your intervention on Intervention Central, you're going to cite that. If you found your intervention in the Behavioral and Academic Interventions book, you're going to cite that. If you found it on What Works Clearinghouse, you're going to cite that. So you're going to want to identify the resource of where you found your intervention. The next prompt is going to be you justifying your connection to research and theory by specifically referencing an article. You're going to include an APA citation for this article, and the article should support the use of the intervention and how it matches your learner. This is going to be a different source than the one that you previously listed in the prompt prior to this. So the prompt prior to this will be where you found your intervention. This is going to be where you found research that connects you using whatever intervention you've chosen for your learner. For example, if you are working with a student with autism and you are doing a social story, then you would find a research article that supports using social stories with students with autism. Or maybe you're doing something with a student in high school who has a learning disability. You would try to find an article that connects to why this intervention that you are doing has a strong connection in helping students in high school with learning disabilities. You want to make sure that you are using CER, so claim, evidence, research. So make sure that you are, so your claim is that this article is a strong connection to your learner and the intervention that you are using. And then you're going to give us pieces of evidence on why these connections are strong, and you're going to tie in the research. The next prompt is, how do you plan to collect data? You're going to explain your data collection process and include your data collection tool. So you're going to make sure that you attach the data collection tool when you are submitting part 4, and you're going to describe in detail your data collection process. You want to make sure that you are describing this in enough detail that I could come into your classroom and collect data in the same exact way that you would if the intervention was happening at that time. And you're going to include the chart that you're going to use for monitoring your students' progress while you are collecting data. You're also going to write an instructional objective with mastery component that matches your intervention. So you want to make sure when you are thinking about a mastery component, that does not mean that the student will have completely mastered the skill at 100% or even maybe 80 or 90%. You want to look at the baseline data of where your student is at with that particular skill and decide what a reasonable mastery component would be for the data collection time period. You're only going to be collecting data for about 5 weeks. So if a student is at 20% currently with the skill, they probably aren't going to make it to 80 or 90% within 5 weeks' time. So you want to make sure that you are writing an objective, and in the objective that the mastery component is something that is realistic to the student and the time period in which the intervention is being executed. You also want to make sure that when you're writing the instructional objective, that it aligns with the data that you are collecting. You want to make sure that you are measuring that skill. So if you are measuring, if you are wanting a student to decrease their number of blurt outs, you are going to be taking data on the amount of times that they blurt out in class. So you want to make sure that your instructional objective with mastery component matches what you are taking data on. These are the pieces of Part 4 that you will be submitting. This is very similar to your pre-plan process in Part 3. So please be sure to reference your feedback that you received from your field-based coordinator when you met for your pre-plan 3, and that you are also referencing your rubrics to make sure that you are answering the prompts completely.